G'day legends. I hope that you're having a really great day and a better week than I am bloody having. Now, I've actually had to redo the intro to this video. I shot the whole video, put it on my editing software. Something happened and my camera is completely out of focus. I don't get why, because it is. But anyway, I don't have the energy to redo it. So we're just going to put some slides or whatever over the top. But I just want to redo the intro. Say g'day. I know it's been a couple of days. I have been really focusing on getting back into health and fitness, and I've come up stumps. I went for a run and I was literally still on my same street. I hit a bit of just footpath that's raised, fell down, and what the doctor thinks has happened is my elbow is actually dislocated and then come back in pretty quickly, but it's broken the radius either on the way in or out. It's just fractured the end knob I can feel underneath. So I'm out for a couple of weeks. This is annoying because I had 2 overseas trips which I've had to can, as well as I'm really struggling to work because I've only got my left hand and typing, and it's a little bit difficult, especially because this is how I make a living. So if you'd like to support me, the link's below, but you never ever need to feel obliged. I'm just more concerned I'm not actually going to be able to provide you guys with the content that you subscribe for. So I am very sorry about that, and I'm sorry this video isn't going to be up to, well, the normal quality of what we do. But thank you guys very much. Merry Christmas, and I hope that you have a fantastic new year, and then I'll see you in 2024. And thank you for everything this year. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to talk over the massive bombardment we saw from Russia into Ukraine, and then we're going to have a quick look over the maps, and that will do us for today. But we saw last night, well, the night before, in Australian time at least, that Russia had its largest air campaign on Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Now, it's been reported that there's 158 missiles and UAVs were fired against Ukraine. Ukraine is reporting that 87 of the missiles and 27 Shaheeds had been intercepted and shot down by Ukraine. Now, something important to say in this is just because something has been intercepted, that doesn't mean that it is not dangerous. The falling debris from things like that is still incredibly dangerous, and there's videos of that debris hitting buildings and stuff as well. You can see the interception, and then it hit, and this was a huge attack, and it's killed at least 30 and injured at least 160. So a huge wave of attacks. One thing I will say in this is, by the size of the attack, those casualty figures, although even one is too many, is tragic, they are showing that people are still taking this seriously and are going to the bunkers and still listening to the alarms. They could be significantly higher than that, and showing that the air defense is actually working. When you compare that to, say, a campaign where you don't have air defense like we've seen in Gaza, you can see how different the figures actually are. But spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force, Colonel Yuri Inhut, who have spoken about a lot on this channel, has said, "We have never seen so many targets on our monitors at once." And I can't show much footage here, but it will be on my Telegram, and I'm sure it's all over the mainstream media. They have slightly different rules about what they can show to us. A lot of the damage, a lot of the fallout from this seems to be across civilian areas. Now, we do know that it is now illegal to film any of these hits in Ukraine, so we don't get any battle damage assessment. And of course, the reason for that isn't so Russia can have battle damage assessment either, or is so they can't have the assessment of how much damage that has done either. But we do know this has hit civilian areas, civilians have been killed, and of course, a lot of infrastructure also being taken out. And one thing with these two is you do have that the air defense is incredibly dangerous as well in the air. And people will take this as like, if a missile coming in gets hit by air defense, then hits something, and it's like, well, then you're responsible. It's like no, the person who's firing the missile still in is still responsible for that, even if the air defense hits it and it hits somewhere else. It's not like now. Does that make sense to you? Like people will go, well, now it's Ukraine's fault. It's like, well, what do you expect? No air defense there. As well as, I think one thing people don't talk about enough is electronic warfare interference on these missiles and targeting systems as well. That there's probably, well, not probably, there is definitely a lot of EW interference onto these. And we have seen as well some very interesting footage come out of an X-101 cruise missile from Russia with flares coming out of it, which here will show trying to at least mask itself to get around some of these air defense. And this is something I haven't seen before, and I think this is very interesting and evolving here. So very similar to like we'll see on like a fighter aircraft as that X-101 missile comes in. But of course, horrific attacks. There's been huge casualties as well as mass damage across the country. And one thing we don't know, we don't actually know what the battle damage assessment from this actually is. Now, I'm sure Russia will release something. Ukraine will be very hush-hush on what targets actually got hit, because at the end of the day, people will say that these missiles are all just aimed for civilian areas. And we'll read over what Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said. Now, there's definitely been damage to civilian areas. There's definitely been civilians killed in this, and residential areas both targeted as well. But it makes no sense strategically to spend millions and millions of dollars worth of these incredibly expensive cruise missiles on those areas. So the ones that got through, what did they actually hit? And of course, we'll never know what was actually targeted, but as well, you know, you have to think about this like logically, that it's not, doesn't make logical sense to just strike into just these areas, that there must be going after something, whether it's poor aiming, poor intelligence, or a level of terrorism. Either way, I'd like to know, like, were the ones that did get through, what actually happened there? So this is what Zelenskyy put on his Twitter: maternity ward, educational facilities, a shopping mall, multi-story residential buildings and private homes, a commercial storage and a parking lot. Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, and cities. Today, Russia used nearly every type of weapon in its arsenal. Kinzhals, cruise missiles, drones, strategic bombers launched, X-101, X-505s, a total of around 110 missiles fired. So, of course, the 158 numbers I put at the beginning, that was with the UAV, like the drones as well, like the Shaheeds against Ukraine, with the majority of them being shot down. Unfortunately, there have been fatalities and injuries as a result of the strikes. All services are working around the clock and providing the necessary aid. My condolences to those who have lost their loved ones. I wish a speedy recovery to those injured. We will surely respond to terrorist strikes, and we will continue to fight for the security of our entire country, every city, and every citizen. Russian terror must and will lose. So I have been very critical around this before. Amnesty and many other investigative agencies, I'm not a big fan of Amnesty, but either way, have been critical of Ukraine for having military installations inside of cities and in up-built areas as well. And that doesn't help some of this. But of course, these targeting to a lot of these areas are just pure civilian areas. But of course, in a war like this, the fog of war, will never get a full idea of the actual battle damage assessment, what was targeted, what has been hit, what was being targeted, and what is the full fallout of the effect of this. And we do know as well, Poland has sort of gone all hands on deck due to calling a meeting, of course, with a missile that may have entered Polish airspace as well. And of course, this is a Russian statement for what has happened through this week of the Black Sea Fleet being targeted down Feodosia in sort of the south eastern part of Crimea, and the ship being taken out there. Now, I believe that this is somewhat in a response to that, and we have seen then some shelling back into Russia as well in response. And of course, this will be a back and forth. Now, the UN has convened over these. Whatever. Like, at the end of the day, I think with the UN, we see this with Israel, Gaza, we see this in this war. It's like the UN can do what they want, but with veto powers of the security, like the permanent bloody security, whatever they called, I'll put it on screen here. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's not like you've got a force. And this is the thing. It's like Russia's broken the Geneva Convention. This war crime, this war crime, this war crime. A lot of the UN just seems like, are you going to go and arrest Putin? No. Like, what actual power do you have other than sanction? If those don't really work, like in the way, what actual power does it actually have there? But the UK has announced an air defence package as well, saying that they'll release hundreds of more missiles in. And this will, of course, be to actually arm Ukraine's air defence, because we don't know exactly how many air defence missiles were fired either in this attack, potentially hundreds, and you don't have that many air defense missiles. So, of course, refilling up those stocks of air defense. We've talked about this before, that Russia may be trying to really wear down Ukraine's air defense capability, especially coming into winter. But one thing we do know, which is just bullshit, was, very early days last year, like a month, 6-8 weeks into the war, articles from Western media saying that Russia was out of missiles. Well, they're not. They've continued these strikes through and obviously can make more of these. People have called out that there are still Western manufacturers, Western suppliers, products as microchips, whatever, ending up in these missiles. Very hard to police that through other items going into countries that aren't sanctioned, that end up in Russia, that can end up in these missile systems. Very hard to police, but many are calling that out. And so many people also talking about the precedent the West has set in Gaza, that what we have seen is very similar to what we have seen happen again and again in Gaza, with things, of course, getting vetoed at Security Council meetings as well there, that has now we've set a precedent of, well, this is happening over here and people seem to be all right supporting it. Why is that not happening here? Now, I don't agree with that. I think that they're completely different wars as far as what is happening. But from looking at the most upvoted comments on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, that is what I see really the most. So I think that would just be worth putting in there as something that is very commonly seen. And I'm just yapping on at this point. But let's have a look over the maps, as we have actually seen some interesting changes. Now, I can't press shift and move at the same time, so I won't be showing you the terrain outline of the map either. But one very interesting thing, we'll look over the map. So, of course, here's Ukraine, capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, and the purple since 14. Now, if we come down into Avdiivka, we do have a video released by President Zelenskyy today. Now, a little bit too low here. Sorry, I'm left-handed this bad boy. Look at this. So, I believe it is this intersection right here. Some are saying it's this intersection, which I don't believe. But from the more reliable sources, I've seen this intersection right here, which is about 1.5 k's from the grey zone, and then about 2 from like the first Russian lines here. Well, come on. We have Zelenskyy has released this video, and of course people have called out that this is a green screen. I don't believe it, but the reason people are calling that out is because his hair and jacket doesn't move in the wind as compared to like the flags in the background. But a jacket like that is going to be significantly heavier material. It might have gel in your hair compared to a flag in the wind. Yeah, but people are calling this out online as a green screen. But for all intents and purposes, I believe he was down in that area and has released this video.
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Авдіївка, наші позиції, наші хлопці. Україна тут захищає свої, захищає увесь наш народ, як і на всій лінії на передовій. Донеччина, Харківщина, Запоріжжя, Херсонщина, лівий берег. Це важко, це біль, це втрати. І це люди, які на собі тримають життя України. Тут життя виборюється. Ми вдячні усім бійцям, кожному солдату, матросу, сержанту, кожному офіцеру, які виносять цю війну на собі. Дякую всім вам, воїни. В Авдіївці разом з командою привітали воїнів з Різдвом, з Новим роком. Усі, хто на нулі, хто захищає нашу країну. Безмежна вдячність всім рідним, кожній родині наших героїв. І усім, хто допомагає, хто працює, щоб у хлопців на фронті було все необхідне. Усім в світі, хто вірить у нас і хто робить все, щоб Україна змогла більше. Пам'ятаємо, що вирішується в цій війні. Захищаємо нашу державу. Слава Україні!
So, of course, releasing a video there, as well as giving out the medals, but a bit of a morale boost that he's down there, in a way, leading from the front, seen in these areas. And, of course, this is being used, and at the end of the day, this is a form of propaganda. Like, look, I'm down here, I'm on the front with our guys, defending, in here, and Putin's sitting in the Kremlin, in a bunker, blah, blah, blah. And that picks up a lot of the propaganda there and increases morale. And that is incredibly important in a war like this. And speaking about the areas at which they're defending, of course, he says, well, the left bank, Kherson, down near Kharkiv, where we do know there's a hell of a lot of fighting and a lot of losses on both sides. As I believe that is one of, if not the most important area of the entire front line that could change things very, very dramatically. Like up in the east here is one thing for Ukraine and the access, farming, whatever, but the southern region down here, Kherson, Kharkiv, of course, sits down here. This is incredibly important to try and get an area to get down into Crimea, and is also have access to the south of the country and access to the Sea of Azov, which is here, and of course the Black Sea. Incredibly important strategically for Ukraine moving forward, and of course strategically very important for Russia for access and that maintain control into the Black Sea. But we haven't seen any territorial change in the past real week in Kherson all the way through to Kharkiv. We haven't seen anything on the deep state map change, but I do believe that we do have a change on then one of the, what are they bloody called? The Syriac maps. Sorry, I'm taking Oxy at the moment for this, on the Siversk. So, of course, we'd have just to the south of Kharkiv here, we have Robotny here, and this is then an update from Syriac. So, situated on the Zap front. During the last 2 days, Russian army made new advances northeast of Kopani, northwest of Robotny, and between this town and Verbovy. The last advance puts Ukraine army in a difficult situation as the last positions of the Syrian defense line is in danger of being encircled. This is why troops began the withdrawal from this area. So, of course, the Syversk line was where Ukraine had that break into. Of course, on this map is seen in this yellow here. This was the lines made to try and counter Ukraine's offensive through the mid months of the year. But now, of course, Ukraine has taken these and has then filled into these lines. But with Russia pushing up through in this region here, is putting more risk on these then being cut back off, as well as making some ground out from Kopani up here to both the north and the east, as well as in the centre. Now, this isn't being shown to the same extent on the deep state map that it is being shown here. And if I can bring up then these defensive works, it might be easier for us to line this up. So maybe not the greatest, because it doesn't show the work through here where Ukraine has now taken up, but is saying that they've pushed up into then this area here. But it will be interesting just to see how that actually looks in the coming few days, few weeks as well. So we haven't seen any change through Uruzani, haven't seen anything, I believe, on this map near Novomarkalivka. We spoke in depth about what Russia's goal could be here to try and cut off Novomarkalivka to make a further connect through its gains near Pobeda from Marinka here. Now, last time we spoke, that Russia really has claimed full control then over Marinka, and Ukraine was adamant they still held positions in the north, but that it was coming under more and more control. There was footage as well. I'll put it on the Telegram of Russian troops, media. I don't really know. If you wear fucking camouflage and you're walking around with the camera, if you get targeted, well, you're bloody in camo. You're sort of you're just a propagandist at that point. But let's have a look that we do see this push up through here, and at this point, even if there's a few areas held, Marinka is under the occupation of the Russian forces. And that video I was talking about, you can see them walking around. It's empty in the center, but of course, completely just turned to rubble. No cars, no nothing. And a bit of an opposite propaganda there. But let's have a look at then what Syriac Maps says on this one. Situation west of Donetsk City, Russian army made an advance of 500 metres and entered the first Dacha of Herovka and completely secured the dam. The advance was made without resistance as Ukraine army retreat to the trenches and defensive positions. The battle for the town won't be easy as Ukrainian troops will try to gain time while building stronger defences in Kurzhavo, the main stronghold of this axis. So you're saying that they've secured just to the southern side here, that saying that Russia's up around here, but that it will be a lot harder pushing through the defensive lines here. And at the end of the day, this area has held for 675 days for Russia to push. Let's say they've made up to here about 6 kilometers, and there's no real indication that this is going to get easier and easier as it heads from Marinka into Avdiivka into Maximilianivka. Like, this isn't going to just get miraculously easier through here, that there's still going to be more and more defense lines. And we do know, and we do see, that Ukraine is building more and more defense lines, especially up around Kharkiv Oblast in the northeast of the country as well. Now we'll move up is then into Avdiivka, and let's roll back a couple of days. Let's go to the 26th. That one. And then let's see where we see some ground made. So we see this extension of grey zone, and a little bit of ground being made just to the north of Opitny, as well as out near Stepova. We do know Russia is pushing very hard. There's some high ground in here, which they have got, and on this train line through here. And then up to the most recent here, we don't see any change over that. But this extension out here near Berdichi and Stepova here as well. Down off this train line, what we do know is they've sort of broken track from this train line and following some of these now tree lines down here. And I'll show you that when I can get the terrain map back up. I'll show you exactly how that is working as well. But let's bring up then this one here. What does confirm some of this. After some days of operational pause, Russian army restarted the offensive to encircle the city. During the last hours, troops made small advance to the water treatment facilities. The battle for Stepova continued. This the push we saw up in the north. Ukrainian army recently gained some positions within the settlement and are clashing with Russian troops in neighbouring tree lines. So this is Berdichi, so just down. Sorry. So Berdichi. Let's move right here. So pushing in on here is where Ukraine made some positions. Oh my God. This ain't going well for me. God damn. I'm leaving this in the video. Russian army continue making advances along the railway, reaching Zarya dashes in the intersection at the northern railway and south of Novokalnovi. So pushing down into this area. Of course, more dashes. It's still a long way off from Novokalnovi in here, but exerting more control in and around here. Now, one thing we don't see is we don't actually see really that Ukrainian push there that they're saying they had in that area, but with Siversk map, we'll say that they have made some area there. We do see... No, not really that. So I like it when these maps line up day to day, because of course the Siversk's always a day or so older. So we do like when they line up perfectly as we move through. Now we're going to move up into Bakhmut, somewhere we have seen Russia regaining a fair bit of the control and initiative in here. So let's roll back to then the 27th. We're having a look up in the north here. We do know as well that Bakhmut compared has a lot more rolling hills, and both sides are using, of course, that ground to their advantage. And there is a lot more high ground around Donetsk here that looks down sort of into Chasiv Yar and down along this road into Kremova here. But there's a lot of rolling hills back here too, which do give Ukraine an advantage with their gun positions here. But let's roll forward a couple of days. We do see that there is a slight regain of some ground by Ukraine's positions in Kremova, and then Ukraine do make some ground back near Donetsk here. And then that brings us up to today. So no significant changes like we have seen on some of the more recent days in that area, but Ukraine do regain some ground here. And then we have this from Syriac as well, stretching north of Bakhmut. Russian army continue advancing around Popovsky Forest and Cemetery. So of course this is on the road of life that came through Kremova, so talking right here. But we did see that advancement. It looked very similar to what we saw, and then it looks like Ukraine may have pushed that back in the past couple of days, but we're not 100% sure on that yet. Now let's move up into Spurny. We did see Russia make a hell of a lot of ground here last week in only very quick concession few days, but it doesn't look like on the deep state we have any real update on that. So on day 672, situation Eastern Front, Russian army advanced from the ruins of the gas station, reaching urban area of Spurny. So reaching some urban areas in Spurny here. And then we have another update from very similar areas. So of course they're saying it's pushed into this area of Spurny here. It is difficult to line up. But then down to the west of here, this is where we did see Russia make a couple of Ks near Vasily in a day. Russian army continue advancing around Spurny. In addition, troops made new advances along the railway towards the settlement of Avdiivka, which I can't see. Oh, here we go on this map. So, of course, this is then the railway pushing up here. But see where this sort of cuts back? It's saying that it's more up into this area here. So, again, these maps don't line up perfectly, but maybe we will see that come over the next day or two. Let's move up then into the Kremenar Forest. A hell of a lot of fighting, and you can just see the density of the positions when we get into hard forest treed area. Look at the density of the positions compared to everywhere else, just because the amount of cover concealment in here. Then let's have a look in here what this says. Situation Lugansk front, Russian army advancing west of the village of Dubrova. So here we have Dubrova here. Let's see if we can line up something in here. So, goddamn. Though just this region right here is saying that there is an advancement in around here, although not shown on the other map. We do know this area, Kremenar, the footage we see coming out of here where it's built up, we see a lot of the Terminators working around this area. Very built up, savage bit of land, and it is very back and forward, very close fighting. Real position to position in here. Now, Terny, we saw Russia make a few Ks out here last time we spoke. This looks like it has settled in here. We don't see any changes on the deep state map that they were talking, you know, now only a couple of kilometers from Terny down to where this natural barrier would be of this water here. Let's see what they've said here. North of Donetsk, Russian army continue advancing towards Terny, and troops are now 2 kilometers from the town. So this is showing that they are a hell of a lot closer than the other map, the deep state here, is showing. So if we have a look at where this cutout right here is, it's showing it's right in here somewhere. So see where this cuts down in, that's here. So it's in this region. Oh my God, my mouse. But in here somewhere. So it's showing there's a fair bit more advancement in there, but that isn't being shown on the map. We don't see any of the change on the deep state right up until we come then up into, I'll call it the Sinkivka front, but the real northeastern part of the country here. Of course, we know Russia's ultimate goal is Kupiansk. Ukraine's ultimate goal is to push them out of here. Now, of course, there's a lot of mountains down here that are acting as a natural barrier, so we might not see a push on the front right to the west up here, but we do see that Russia loses a fair bit of ground near Yahidny here. So let's go back a couple of days and then we'll go forward, and that's what we see to today. So the ground has changed, has pushed back into Yahidny. Now, this hasn't come up as blue, so I'm not really sure if it's a correction on some geolocations on the map or new ground made. Normally that would be blue, or it's a correction on the map, but that Russia do exert less control there and Ukraine do exert more control. And this is, I believe, one of, if not, well, I think Krinky is the most important, but this would almost be second important up in this region. A lot less density of towns compared to other spots and more open ground to move through, of course, up where Kharkiv sits. We know that Ukraine is building a hell of a lot of defenses around Kharkiv, so they may follow similar idea of what could happen here. Now, Legends, I know this one will be a little bit all over the spot. I'm not on it either, but I hope that you're enjoying yourself. If you'd like to support me, there's links down below, but never feel obliged. And I hope I'll see you soon, and I'll see you into the new year. Thank you very much. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye.